Hello. So good to see you guys and be with you again. Happy Friday here in Minnesota. It is something called the MEA weekend, which is like Minnesota Educators Association. So all the Minnesota teachers are in conferences, and that means that we have our kids home. Yay for Thursday and Friday. It is wonderful to have them around, and it's kind of fun. A couple of them slept out in hammocks outside last night at 45 degrees. And so I, of course, was staying close to listen, and I didn't sleep so well. But we are excited to be back with you guys today. And we are talking about removing hindrances to love. Just a reminder, this is part 2. We started this last week. So if you want to go back and catch part 1, you can do that on our Facebook page or on our website at www.thehomemadefamily.com, or on our YouTube channel. Just search Nathaniel and Amy White, The Homemade Family, or anywhere podcasts are found. You can just search for The Homemade Family, and we should pop up there. All right, with that, I'm going to let Nathaniel do most of the talking today because I'm a little tired and I'm not sure what my words are going to say.
So last week we started talking about removing hindrances to love, and this is actually a super significant thing because I think all of us are aware of the fairly self-evident and obvious truth that that if we all just loved well, then our families would be awesome, right? And if our and I mean, it extends farther out than that. Like, your workplace would be awesome, and our cities would be awesome, and our countries would be awesome, and even the relationships between countries, like there would be no wars, and it would be great if we all just loved well. So what's the deal? Why don't we? Well, in the bigger picture, there's a lot of other things that we could get into that isn't the topic of this podcast. But when we're talking about inside our homes, there's a lot that we can do to remove the hindrances to love. We don't want to be a voice in your life that's just saying you should love better, because that actually becomes a hindrance to love. Like, having this massive obligation of you should do something actually shuts down the whole process of love, because love and shame, they just don't, they're not good friends. They don't like hanging out with each other. So the more you heap shame on somebody or on people, the less fostering of an environment that is for love. It just doesn't grow in the ground of shame. So last week we talked about we got into this a little bit. We started with just saying, hey, first of all, just set love as a priority. Obviously, if you're not even trying to pursue love, then that is actually in and of itself, that's a hindrance to love. So we talked more about that last week. You can go back and listen to that. And then we started to get into really the major hindrance to love that most people, pretty much all of us, have. And that hindrance is learning to love ourselves well. And maybe at first glance, that's like, well, what the heck does that have to do with loving my family well? Like, I'm trying to love these people, and you're telling me like I should focus more on myself. Like, I think I'm the problem. And actually, I get it that this is maybe counterintuitive, but it is dead on truth that the quickest, most powerful and effective way for you to love your family better and consistently, and to have it just naturally flow out of you, is to learn to love yourself well. I just want to pause. I mean, you want to say anything?
No, I think
no. All right. Far. So I will keep on moving. So there are actually 3 different verses in Scripture that confirm this as a reality. Jesus said, first of all, he confirmed that the entire law of the Old Testament, all the law and the prophets, are summed up in saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, if you don't love yourself, it's going to be hard to love your neighbor. And that's, I think, what most of us experience. Like, man, love is hard. Well, probably because we don't love ourselves as much as God actually would like us to. And if you're thinking this sounds like narcissistic or arrogant, I'll try to help out with that in just a second. But hang on for a second. Stay with us. So Another verse Jesus says is, love one another as I have loved you. In other words, loving one another starts with receiving his love. Not just like, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And it's this, yeah, I know, understand this truth. Like, sure, it's true, Jesus loves me. But no, actually receiving it and experiencing the feeling of being loved, and then love others as he's loved us. The third one is, I think it's John who writes, we love because he first loved us. And again, it's establishing this truth that we are not God doesn't ever ask us to be the source of love. He's like, I'm the only one who can handle that job. I am love. I will be your source. What he does ask is that we steward love. He never asked us to be the source of love, just the steward of love. And so that means that you've got to receive it from somewhere first. So let us just start by brushing you off of any undue responsibility you have felt put on you or you've taken on. And us for ourselves, we'll just brush ourselves off of that as well, of just any feeling of responsibility that you have to somehow conjure up more love for your family because, gosh darn it, you're supposed to love your family and do a good job loving them. It's actually not on you to do that. Never has been, never will be. It's just you start by receiving love, and then you have something to steward.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times, though, we feel like we are unlovable, and there's certain things that have happened in our lives that put hindrances in the way of allowing this love to flow, both to receive that love, but then to give that love. And sometimes we just try to love out of, duty and obligation, while we're still running and going. But at the same time, we need to take that pause to receive love or to remove the things that are getting in the way of how we are being loved by the Lord and then how we're loving others. So
yeah, I think also we don't know what healthy is if unhealthy has been our normal. Or even if healthy has been our normal, like God actually has even more love and he loves us even more than we know. When we, like Ephesians 3:20, how like exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we ask or imagine. And that's the love of God. And so there's always this deeper love to encounter and to know and to be transformed by, so that we can love more. So even if healthy was your example, there's more. If unhealthy was your example and you're normal, there's more. And whatever your normal has been, until you see something different, our tendency is to just think that's just the way that it is. So whether just wherever you're at in this, we're encouraging you to engage in this process of pursuing love. And it's a lifelong pursuit of just growing and maturing in love. And a massive part of that the whole way through is learning to love yourself better. We talked last week about how really that starts with just agreeing with God. Like, hey, he says that he loves you, which means you're lovable, and he's right. So we talked about that last week. And then we started to get into, how do you learn to love yourself? I guess the first one of that one, I'm just looking at my notes again. The first one of how to learn to love yourself is agree with God. Second, meditating on truth. Just 1 John 3:20, 1 John 4. There's a lot of different references in scripture. You can meditate on these as truth and declare them over yourself. Celebrating your wins. Writing down personal wins for the day, even if it's just, I got up and I got dressed, I made my bed today, whatever it might be, even if they're small, whatever it is, you celebrate your wins, and celebrating them at a higher level intensity than maybe you think they merit, because there's something that does in the rewiring of your brain. Abraham says, hello, Amy and Nathaniel. Hello, Abraham. It's a beautiful family name right there. So today, all of that was like the introduction, and I'm notorious for over introducing things. But hopefully that was helpful for you anyway. But today we want to get into 2 more ways of learning to love yourself. And as we're getting into this, I want to give you a quick diagnostic tool to just kind of see where are you at in this process of learning to love yourself well. So if you ever just go to a mirror and look yourself in the eye in the mirror and you say to yourself, I am loved. Like, I am lovable. I am worthy of love. And go say that to yourself in the mirror. If you're listening to this later on down the line and it's not the live, like just press pause, go do that right now. Come back and start playing it again. And if you are like most people, that's actually really hard to do, is to look yourself in the mirror and say, I am loved. I am lovable. I am worthy of love. And in saying, recommending this, I said it was a diagnostic tool. It is not something to say, oh my gosh, and now I've got another thing to feel bad about. Hey, this is a place that I actually do need to grow in truth, and then we can begin moving forward in just growing in that. So the first or the next step of learning to love yourself, the next tool towards helping you learn to love yourself well that we want to talk about today is inner healing. Do you want to?
No, go for it.
Okay, man, she really meant it when she said, "I'm going to talk the whole time today."
Yeah, I'll talk there.
Okay. So inner healing is not some scary thing. It's not some, I don't know. We've known a lot of people who only look at the bad Google reviews and they're like, oh my gosh, this is demonic. And it's like, no, actually it's the opposite of that. Or there's still some stigma for some people on mental health and emotional health and things like that. And this isn't, whatever, like inner healing is something that everybody needs. This is not for those super broken people who end up in mental institutions. This is not for people who've tried to commit suicide, not just for them. This is, this is something that every single person needs. It's like taking a shower. You don't go through life without getting clean. And, stuff comes into everybody's life that roughs up our insides, and everybody needs cleaned up. Everybody needs it. You need it. I need it. Amy needs it. Our kids need it. We practice this in our home on a weekly basis, at some point in the week, with different ones of either ourselves or our kids. So how do you know where you need inner healing? Well, if you go back to last week and you hear some of what we talked about on meditating on truth and renewing your mind and those kinds of things, you want to start there. But if you are in the process of renewing your mind regarding loving yourself, and you find like, man, every time I try to look myself in the mirror and declare I am loved, I am lovable, I am worthy of love, every time I do that, what my dad used to say to me, or what my teacher said to me, or how my friends treated me, or how I was treated at school, or that thing that happened at the one job that I had, or whatever it was, it just keeps coming up with a louder voice saying, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. If that sort of experience, if you start having that kind of experience, or as you're working to try to believe it when people compliment you, and there's a louder voice that keeps shutting down trying to believe that, those kinds of persistent lies and persistent pushback is a real good, clear indicator something happened that caused a wound that led to you believing a lie, and you go get some inner healing and it heals the wound. You can break off the lie. You can receive God's truth instead, and it fills you with life. And all of a sudden it's like Jesus saying the parable of the soils, where there's the rocky soil or the shallow soil or whatever. It's like it takes that rock out of the soil, and now all of a sudden you've got good soil for the truth of I am loved to grow in. So where do you go for inner healing? Because we're not actually getting deep in, we're not helping people process right now. I think there's a lot of different organizations that do inner healing. Some of the major ones that I know of are Sozo Ministries, Elijah House, Theophostics, Restoring the Foundations. There's a bunch of other ones out there too, I believe. And so, if you're in the Minneapolis area, like we are, you can look up Sozo. There's a ton of churches and outside church ministries that do Sozo ministries. You'll find somebody nearby you that does that, and you can schedule an appointment and get some help in that regard. Otherwise, if you're not in our area, just look up inner healing, Christian inner healing, and you'll probably find one of those ministries near you.
Yeah. So, and just super fast too, if you do find yourself with those places of persistent lies, like take some time to sit down, write them down, and then just say, Jesus, what truth, if I give you this lie, what truth do you give me in return? Write down the truths and then begin to meditate on them. You guys, another really big hindrance to love is actually just not forgiving yourself for mistakes that you've made in the past or things that you've even done today. And it is really hard to love and forgive others when you haven't forgiven yourself for things. There was something that happened when my daughter was very young. I had 3 kids in 27 months, and I was nursing my third born, but I had a bunch of milk set out in bottles, and my daughter was like, that I had pumped, and she was like 12 months old, 13 months old, 14 months old. I guess she was 14 months old at the time, because it was literally right after I got home from the hospital with my baby. And she was like trying to pick up this bucket of these bottles that had been pumped of milk, and she tripped and spilled it, and like the milk was wasted. It was all over the carpet, and I was so mad. I yelled at her. I was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And for me, that hurt, like just the look on her face. And I know that she was trying to help, but in my sleep deprived, 3 babies, haven't slept through the night in 3 years, just coming home, it was just a really rough time of life. And I held on to that unforgiveness of myself for a long time. Like I would beat myself up over and over and over about how could I ever yell at this precious little girl who was just doing these things. And it was hurting me to the point of creating a barrier in me to be able to love myself or my kids or my family well, because I kept thinking like, I'm such a bad person. I'm such a bad person. But when I finally sat down and was like, you know what, I need to forgive myself. Like, I've apologized to my daughter who doesn't even remember the incident. She's forgiven me. Everybody's around me has forgiven me. The Lord's forgiven me. Yeah. But sometimes I am my own worst enemy and not being willing to forgive myself. And so when I finally forgave myself and cried and processed and just allowed that to go, that actually removed a hindrance that would allow love to flow more freely and in a healthier manner, especially between my daughter and I, like that I wasn't always trying to make up for something or do things that, there was just something broken there. And so when I did finally forgive myself, it really helped to allow love to flow. I know, Nathaniel, you've had some really major breakthroughs in things. Once you learn to forgive yourself and to not dwell on it anymore, then that helps you to move forward and things.
So I mean, there's a deeper principle in this that we tend to go towards whatever we focus on. Whatever we focus on will tend to grow in our lives. So if we're focusing on our failures, we tend to it tends to cause more failures to grow and happen in our lives. And so then we beat ourselves up more. And so, I mean, it becomes a downward spiral tailspin, leading us into deeper and deeper depression and self-hatred and all of those kinds of things. And we are so busy beating ourselves up and honestly, and fostering an eye that looks for the negative, that then we apply that eye towards the people we know we're supposed to love. And then we only see the negative and we treat them out of, like, we have nothing to give them. So what comes out is the same stuff we've been feeding ourselves with. And so we end up mistreating the people around us who we do actually love. We care deeply for them. And then we see that we messed up again. And so what do? We beat ourselves up even more again, over and over again. And the only way to break the cycle is to forgive ourselves. The only way. And again, this is the same thing as agreeing with Jesus. If he forgives you, you can forgive you. Yeah. So the next piece that's very related to that is forgiving others. I just was seeing this earlier today from Corrie Ten Boom, that she said, forgiveness is letting someone out of prison and then realizing it was you.
Oh, that's so good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially in family, we need to practice forgiveness almost every single day, because when you live close with people, like there's going to be people stepping on your toes, getting in your way, offending you constantly, doing things that you're like, why? Why are you doing this? All the time. And it's not an excuse for bad behavior. It actually is just something that frees your emotions to be able to continue to love the people that you spend time with every single day.
And again, if what happens when we are holding on to an unforgiveness is we are holding on to, no, you did this to me. Mm-hmm. You did this to me. And we might be trying to kind of peek around it, like look over it. I'm trying to put it behind me, like we're trying to not let it affect us, but really it's still it's stuffed in there, and it's always in the way between you and me. Mm-hmm. And so every interaction that I have with you, it's very quick for me to see that again. Even if it's not always there, it's like, oh, you did this, that, and then you're always like that. And it comes up so quickly. So again, it is constantly this thing that keeps getting in my vision of how I see you, of the way that you treat me, of all of these kinds of things. And it doesn't allow our relationship to grow, and it doesn't allow room for love to grow in that relationship, because I'm just trying to hold things together and not freak out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of this, like, I don't go to my kids and be like, I forgive you, for what you did this morning. It's like something that I need to take care of, in my own heart. Like, it really is these little things. And something I found that's just super helpful is to say, and I often do this out loud, like, so-and-so, I forgive you, and I release you from owing me anything.
Yeah.
That releasing them from owing you anything actually releases a lot.
Yeah.
And then to forgive from the heart, not just like in words, but actually forgiving from the heart.
Yeah. And again, all of this is not some linear principle, like there's A and there's B and there's C. Like, no, this is all tangled. It's very messy. And so if you find persistently you're trying to forgive and you're trying to forgive and you're trying to forgive, but the pain of that moment or the unforgiveness or whatever, it keeps coming on, it keeps coming back, it keeps influencing your decisions and your thought process and those kinds of things, then again, maybe that wound has something else attached to it, or it's deeper than you thought, or there's something special you need to do in an inner healing process to bring healing to that, to the moment of what happened that caused the hurt in the first place. And so again, go get inner healing, use the resources that God has given us to get set free.
Yeah, so that love can flow freely.
Yeah.
I'm just checking out our time, and I'm thinking that I really want to do enough justice to the next topic that maybe we'll just end a little bit short today and jump in next time with this full one. What are you thinking?
I don't know. I was just thinking that myself. I think let's just go for it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, unless we just turn this into like a 4-week long thing, but let's just try to get through it, because the next tool, whatever, for learning to love yourself is learning to set boundaries. And basically, let's go for it. Yes. Sorry, there's I don't know who it is. It just says Facebook user.
Facebook user.
Says, let's go for it. Hello, anonymous Facebook user. We're glad you're here. So setting boundaries, learning to set boundaries is a necessary way of learning to love yourself. And basically, again, if you have nothing to give, you have nothing to give. And so I have no words to give. learning to set boundaries starts with knowing that you are worth it. You are worth protecting. You are worth guarding. You are worth keeping. You are worth prioritizing. Loving your kids as you would love yourself. Like, you put boundaries around your kids. You don't just hand them off to any Joe Schmo to babysit them. You guard them. You keep them. You protect them. You care for them. And it's okay. It's good. It's healthy for you to do the same for yourself. You're worth it. Also, recognizing that you don't need to save the world. It's not your job. As a pastor and as a big dreamer, this one has been very hard for me to get past the I have to change nations, I have to change the world, I have to save the world, I have to make a big impact, I have to, and realizing that actually the most powerful thing that all of us can do is just being faithful with what's immediately in front of us. That if all of us did that, then we wouldn't need the heroes that come in and do massive stuff. If all of us just take care of what's right in front of us, like, you just love your kids. And that's all that you need to do. You don't need to do the soccer practice. You don't need to do the book club. You don't need to do the like all the 10, 12, 20 different groups for each of your kids and yourself during the week. Like, you don't need to run yourself ragged. You don't need to be the Pinterest mom, the Instagram mom. You just don't need to do these things. Like, you can say no, and it's okay. You're not going to be causing eternal damage to the people around you, to just take care of yourself so that you have something to give your family.
Yeah, I think it's a Brené Brown research and study. She said that people who actually have strong boundaries are actually more available emotionally to give a healthy yes to things. And It's true. I used to work for a coffee shop that was part of a nursing home. And so I had to go through the nursing home training. And part of the training that they were showing was talking about that how you know that you're exhausted or burned out is that you begin to pull back emotionally. And so actually being overworked, being overtired, doing all the extra running actually makes you love less. Like, you begin to put up walls to guard yourself. You pull in because you're just so tired that you can't emotionally. And so if you're finding that you're actually a little emotionally overspent, or that you're having a hard time engaging in love and letting love flow through you, or you're just laughing less, I would suggest that you'd sit down and you actually assess your life and find out, hey, how many things am I involved in, and where am I giving, and where are the stressors coming from that are actually causing me to begin to shut down? And here I just thought that I was like putting up walls and like pulling away from people. And the truth was, no, I was just actually really over busy.
Yeah.
And so when I began to have a powerful no to this and this and this, and find where I could say yes, that actually allowed me to find rest, to engage more fully in the things that are more meaningful.
Yeah. And I think that this actually is a particularly strong message right now. I think I'm going to be preaching on it in the next week or two, is just what pruning looks like when God prunes our lives, because he actually takes the places that are bearing fruit and he prunes some of them. And what that does is like, okay, well, you're bearing fruit in these 12 areas of life, but really his purpose and his focus in your life is for you to bear even more fruit in these 6 areas. So he cuts away some of the things that you have God stories in, and you've seen him move powerfully in, and you encountered him there, and it was good, and there was life, and there is still life in those branches. And he's like, yeah, but I want more life in these few areas. And so he prunes away some of the good to make some of the good greater. And I remember an experience of that in my life when in some of what Amy was saying, I was doing an internship. And one of the things that the overseer of the internship had us interns do every week was write out an hour by hour, this is how I spent my week. And one of the questions he would always ask us was, what was your best day? What was your worst day? And consistently Tuesdays were always my worst day of the week. And he's like, well, do you notice why? And I was totally clueless, because sometimes you need somebody to show you the obvious things. And and he helped me see that my Tuesdays started with a Bible study at 5 a.m. And I went right there from there to internship for 3 hours. And I went right from there to work for 8 hours. And I went right from there to a weekly friends hangout that went till like 11 or whatever at night. And so I was literally running from 4:30 in the morning to 11 at night every single Tuesday. And he's like, why do you think your Tuesdays are always bad? Like, because I just didn't have a good boundary to say no to things that were life-giving.
Yeah, I've just been pondering this lately too. And it's, I've been reading and going through the Dave Ramsey thing. And he's like, with money, you need to make a budget every month. If you know what you're getting in, you need to tell your dollars where they're going to go. And if you have an unexpected overage in this area, you need to find the place in the other area where you can take that $50 from, so that you're constantly staying level. And I thought, man, what if we budgeted our time the way that we budget our money? And so, that would be, hey, this is where my time should be going. But all of a sudden this came up. And instead of just trying to cram it in, I actually need to say, no, I can do that. I can say yes to that. But that means that I'm going to have to say no in another place of my life, so that I can stay in balance with my time and my emotions and my energy. When our kids were young, we gave ourselves a boundary that we couldn't be out more than 2 evenings a week. It was just the kids.
It was a hard boundary.
It was a hard boundary. And it was hard, when all our friends are going to the parties and doing the things. But the truth was, we would find if we tried to overcommit and go do these fun things, our kids were emotionally a mess. We were overtired and a mess. And so it just needed to be that season. We have a lot more flexibility now. We can do so much more stuff, but keeping boundaries actually is really good for helping you to love more fully and give a more wholehearted yes when those things come up.
I heard a leader who he's a world-renowned leader, travels, speaks, writes books, all these things. It's very easy for him to be busy, and he loves being busy. And he was living being busy, and then all of a sudden his mom started having some serious health issues, and he was done. Like he all of a sudden had that extra demand on his time, like Amy was saying, and he had no room to give. He had to somehow care for his mom in the middle of all these other responsibilities. And I remember hearing a message that he was speaking after that. And he said, I realized that it's not healthy to live life at 95% capacity. Like, we need to live life at like 65% capacity, so that when something comes up, we actually have room for it. Mm-hmm.
Budgeting the time for when the uh-ohs happen, like you budget your money for, when the car alternator goes out, you got to budget your time for when somebody gets sick and all of a sudden, everything changes. And, even just kids' trips to the doctor or whatever, it's the little things, but making good budgets of our time.
So yes, inner healing, learning to set boundaries. These are all really awesome, healthy shifts to bring in our lives to learn how to love ourselves well. And we need to learn to love ourselves well, because that, for most people, is the main hindrance to loving our family well. And if we can just love our families well, we're going to create an amazing world to live in.
Yep. Join us next week. We will be talking about teaching your kids to love themselves well, so that the love can flow between them too. So Join us next week. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks for your interaction and cheering us on. We really appreciate it. And we bless you in your parenting journey. Yes.
Have a good week.
Have a great week. We'll see you next week.